Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth. Nothing more.
Welcome back to MythVision Podcast. I'm your host, Derek Lambert. Today, we're having a friendly debate discussion on whether or not the Quran contains scientific facts. Sometimes they're known as scientific miracles found within the Quran. And today, I'm going to introduce you to our guest. We have Masood Ahmed. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you.
And we have Hanney Salem. Welcome, my friend.
Hello, everyone.
For those who don't know, Hani has a YouTube channel, special little plug here, Critical Faculty. He does a lot on science. He's an ex-Christian, ex-Muslim, and he's going to be taking the position that the Quran, I most likely, I don't want to put words in your mouth here, Hani, but does not contain scientific facts. Am I wrong?
You are very right, Derek. That's going to be my position.
Awesome. And then his opponent in this debate is Masood. Masood has written 3 books on Amazon. The one I specifically pulled up was Ancient Astronomy, Allah's Narrative. And
you just click my name there and it'll take you to the other books.
Let me hit back because it's not highlighting your name.
Yeah.
I hit that last time and it didn't take me to the other books. Here we go. Creation of Earth and Origins of Life, Allah's Narrative. And then Sharia for Australians, Allah's Narrative, Boycotting the Hungry Jacks. So these are the 3 books. I need to add it in the description. But if you're looking for him, Allah's Narrative, Masood. You can't miss it. It pops up on Amazon. So there is a little shout out to our guest. I appreciate both of you gentlemen joining me today on MythVision.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you, Derek.
Absolutely. Let me let everybody know in the chat. Hit the like button. I dropped a poll. So whether or not you think the Quran contains scientific facts or not, or you don't know, you can vote right now in the chat. Let us know. We'll check it out at the end. And also, if you have any questions, super chat them. We will get to them at Q&A. The way we're going to do this debate, we decided on a 15-minute opening, allowing Masood to bring his arguments to show the scientific facts in the Quran that he believes are there. Hani will have a 15-minute opening as well. We're not going to do rebuttals. We're going to go straight into open dialogue. I will only intercede if necessary because we're not getting anywhere or we're over talking each other, and I hope that doesn't happen. I believe both gentlemen should be able to do that. And then we'll do Q&A as long as super chats are in the building. We'll take those questions from the audience, and then we'll go to 5-minute closing each. And yeah, are you ready to start, gentlemen?
Yeah, sure do.
Awesome. All right, we're going to open up here with the slide. And then if you would, well, Hanny's already muted, so he's good to go. All right, Masood, let me get the timer out. I'm going to have 15 minutes so that we're fair on the clock. Bear with me. And ready when you are. Say when.
Yeah, okay. So this is a presentation of the concept of what Quran advocates to be its own narrative in how God created the earth and its skies. So I'll just give you overview of what the concept is, and we'll go from there. So next slide, please. So here is a timeline of 6 periods. So what the Quran advocates is the first 2 periods went into assembling the earth itself, which we call proto-earth or embryonic earth or nascent earth. So the first 2 periods was the ball of the earth was assembled. And that's shown in the Quran verse where you see the blue highlight number 1. It says nascent earth in the 2 periods out of 6 frames. So that's the evidence picked from the Quran, which says in the first 2 periods, the proto-earth or the nascent earth was formed or assembled. Point number 2, it says the next 4 periods out of the 6 periods after the earth was assembled were actually invested into plate tectonics, casting fixtures and like mountains on earth. And with that, all of the resources of the earth in the mantle and in the crust were measured. So that's the kind of time scale that the Quran proposes. First 2 periods were invested in putting up or setting up this ball of earth, the proto-earth. And the next 4 periods, the earth was modeled with plate tectonics, and all the resources and everything else got measured. And when it comes to its skies, the Quran says on day 3, which is once after the proto-earth got assembled, God commanded it to design the skies. So the reference 3 over there, it says in the Quran, on period 3, God looked at it and it was smoke. The proto-earth or the embryonic earth was surrounded or engulfed with smoke around it, a blanket of smoke. And God said to it and to the earth to come together as a functional design. Okay. And that's where the process of sky construction began on period 3. All right. The Quran does come to say or add a little bit of detail. And it says the skies, which are 7, God constructed in 2 different frames. So that's what you find on the reference 4 highlighted. He fashioned them into 7 skies in 2 periods out of 6 frames. Okay. So this gives you a general guidance into understanding the timelines and the frames of creation. Can we go to the next slide, please? So on day 3, particularly on period 3, I'll stop using day and I'll just more so use a period to render a better understanding. So on period 3, what God says is in the Quran, the sky, which was smoke-like at that time, that shrouded planet Earth, the embryonic, the nascent planet Earth, and the Earth itself, God says, was one entity, one single entity, because this smoke came out of all of the material coming together, and the temperatures and the pressures were high, and there was fire and everything, and it was chaotic ambience, and that's what made the smoke engulf the planet Earth. And God says this was one entity, this was one unit. And God says we separated all of the resulting skies, which God says are 7 in number, from this unit. All right. And since then, God says he caused plate tectonics to have the fixtures and the mountains on Earth. And he designed it into valleys, and so that inhabitants on Earth can be guided through those valleys. And then in point 3, God says, after all of that design, that went on in modeling the earth in 4 periods, which is the second phase of earth building. Finally, God says, I designed the final sky layer as a fortified roof. Okay, so we know that's how I know that the 2 days that were invested in sky building were actually apart. So the first set of skies came out on period 3, and the second set of skies came out on period 6. So now I think it makes sense for viewers to understand the diagram that I'm presenting here. Another important point, another detail that the Quran adds to this whole thing is on that's a reference 4. If you go to reference 4 there, God says, no, just go back to the previous slide. Reference 4 is right there, verse 2:29. God says, He created well-developed ecosystems on earth for you. Then He attended to the design of the sky and perfected them as 7 functional layers. So even the first set of skies, which were created on period 3, were eventually perfected on period 6. So the second set of skies that were created on period 6 also were perfected in period 6. So the initial set of skies that were created, the point in the Quran highlights is they were perfected on period 6. So go to the next slide, please. All right, a little bit into details of what actually happened on period 3. This has its own impetus in the Quran. It's a defining feature in the Quran, how it relates this information. So what actually happened was on day 3, once the Earth, proto-Earth, was ready, it had assembled all the mass it could, and the temperatures and the pressures were right. God commanded it, and to the smoky sky, God says this was one entity, and this was a separation event where God brought out some skies out of the earth, wherein He issued a command to the earth and to this smoky sky to evolve. He said to it and to the evolving earth, amalgamate willingly or by compulsion, and both entities converged in obedience. All right. So this is a fascinating feature. Fascinating aspect of how the Quran comes to show this information, that God commanded both the bodies, the embryonic earth and the smoky sky, that the blanket that was shrouding the earth, these 2 entities responded to God that there would be a functional design. They would be forming into a functional design. And what that means is the smoky sky arranged or got structured into being the homosphere, and the earth responded with its heart kicking in. The iron core, the dynamo, kicked in, casting out magnetic fields. So the birth of magnetosphere just took place here, and it shrouded the blanket, and the blanket of smoke structured itself into being the homosphere. Okay, so that's a bit. So next slide, please. All right, now we'll look into the first sky, which is the birth of homosphere. So homosphere has a descriptor in the Quran. The Quran uses the descriptor called Jawf, which is normally translated as air or atmosphere. Okay. The reason why I call it homosphere is for all of these different aspects that the Quran brings forward, which I've shown here in the slide as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what the Quran says is the homosphere is a sky layer. It's a functional sky layer that allows the birds to fly and the clouds to hang in there. And it's what it means really is the aeronautics. It facilitates aeronautics, all right? Because the ambience, the Jawf, the atmosphere is homogeneous, all right? And then there's additional information given here. God says, He extracted from the homosphere brightness as day and darkened its night. So we know that the earth, the glow on the earth that facilitates our vision is because of the fact that the hemisphere extracts blue light out of the sunlight. Okay, and it shows blue. It's lit bright. It's lit bright, and it's shown blue, and hence enables the vision. And at night, obviously, when the light is gone, it's darkened. All right, so that's another information that shows you that the Quran is actually talking about hemisphere. Okay. And another key factors, just before I proceed any further, God says is when this separation event happened on period 3, God straight away it rained globally and life got organized. As we see in reference 1, he says, and we separated them and we have made every living thing out of water. Will they not believe? Okay, so advancing further, so that's the description of hemisphere. To summarize, the first sky. So we'll go to the next slide, and the next sky layer, which is functional sky layer, is the heterosphere. What heterosphere is, in a sense, is rarefied particles which are ionized. Okay, and they don't permit aeronautics, in the sense that birds will not be able to fly there because the particles are so further apart. They are not like a homogeneous medium where there's winds flowing and stuff like that, facilitating aeronautics. So that's the point where we call it in science Kármán line. And after that altitude, what usually happens is aeronautics becomes rocketry. So essentially you need a rocket power to travel from that point on. So the sky layer above hemisphere is called as heterosphere, where it's also called as geocorona, in other terms, where the particles are, they have it contains cold plasma. They are rarefied. They are not like gas that you find within hemisphere, right? So that's heterosphere layer. At the heart of the heterosphere layer is the plasma sphere. Plasma sphere contains cold plasma. So that forms the heart of the heterosphere itself. All right. So I classify them as homospheric sky and the heterospheric sky. That's how the Quran comes to categorize both of these layers. And the important point to note here is when the Quran talks about the second sky, heterosphere, it gives it a little context. It says by this filtering ocean. So on period 3, when the earth was baking hot and boiling, and as the rain condensed on day 3 because of the formation of hemisphere, immediately it rained globally. And when it rained, because of the heat and radiation pressure on the surface earth, a plasma field just developed, and earth was beginning to engulf with a blanket of plasma. You know what I mean? So that's the beginning of the earth being engulfed with the blanket of plasma, and that's how the Quran comes to detail the context and helps you understand what that sky layer actually is. So we'll go to the next slide.
There's 30 seconds left, Masood.
To completion of 15 minutes.
15 minutes, yeah.
Wow. So do you want me to stop at 15 minutes?
Hanney, what do you want to do? You want to push it to 20, or do we?
Do you know what? I think there's a lot material here that we can cover, and then we can come back, because otherwise it will end up being too much, like a gish gallop type of approach. And
Okay,
I think there's enough information to sink our teeth in.
Let me give him 60 more seconds then, and go ahead, Masood.
So, okay. I mean, I would have wished to complete this 7 skies at least. So anyway, I'm being slow, I suppose. I should be a little bit faster. So the third sky, magnetosphere, as I just explained in the separation event, the separation event resulted in the Earth responding with its hard iron core, casting out magnetic field, and this magnetic field shrouding and protecting the homosphere and the other layers of the sky, of other skies that emanate from the Earth. So that's the third sky. We'll go to the next slide. The birth of ozone. So the birth of ozone is a sky layer that came about in the second set of skies, which were organized on period 6. So what happened until then was God was organizing and modeling the Earth's surface and setting it up, creating life, creating ecosystems. And a lot of these microorganisms participated in giving out oxygen. And after there was sufficient oxygen, God formed or forms the sky on period 3 and gives it a context. The context God explains.
Masood, we hit time. I gave you even more than a minute,
right.
just to be fair.
Not a problem.
We did 15 minutes. I think we should probably have changed up the time on how we wanted to do this, or been better prepared for the time that we had. Hanney, you got 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Let me bring this down, and then
I had a very strong feeling that 16 slides will not be covered in 15 minutes. It's from experience. It would have been an impossible task.
So, do you need to present anything, or are you just?
No. Just I've got a very clear case in my head. I'm not gonna bother the audience with graphs, and I'm just gonna.
Awesome. So Masood, me and you, we're gonna mute just to make sure that we don't interrupt or anything. You have those children running around, you know how it is. Super chats, we'll get to the end during Q&A. Ask your questions, vote in the poll. Now we're gonna allow Hani to go ahead and starting my time now.
Cool. First of all, I want to start a conversation with scientific miracles in the Quran. For something to be miraculous, it's the suspension of the physical laws. So I've never understood the term a scientific miracle, because a miracle by definition is the suspension of the physical laws, and therefore can never be scientific. Science will only probe and understand and explain physical phenomena, and therefore for something to happen in the physical realms, it can never be miraculous, because it obeys the physical laws. So I never understood the term, but whether there are early indications of scientific facts yet to come and understood by humanity, and therefore put by God before humans would get to know them, then I'll accept the premise. And if there are some signals of early scientific facts within the Quran, then from the word go, the fact that the God spent a couple of days creating Earth before the universe itself is in contrast to what we know about physics. The Earth is 4.5 billion years old. The universe is 3.77, 3.78 billion years old. The universe is far more, a lot older than the Earth itself. So for God to create the Earth itself, according to Quran, and then start working on other elements of this existence, it's completely in contrast to what we know in science. So from the word go, the whole predication of the whole story is going to fall apart, because if Earth is created before and everything else, then we have a young universe and very ancient Earth. Makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Now I'll move to, so the Earth, we know for sure it cannot be created before the universe itself. And then I'll move to the concept of skies. There is no such thing as skies. There are 5 layers of the atmosphere of space, what we call space. There is no such thing as sky. Sky is a very old concept, borrowed from old cultures. This is another thing I want to refer to. You'll find that most of the knowledge provided in the Quran, it has been circumventing in the ancient world. a world that is made of a dome with skies and windows where the rain can fall from, obviously a flat earth to follow, and it's a certain concept that is borrowed from the ancient knowledge of the world and the universe, and therefore it's not applied whatsoever in this kind of model that we know about Earth. There is no 7 skies, 5 layers. The mention of birds cannot fly outside of our atmosphere, and rightly so, because there's no air, begs the question of why do angels have bloody wings? If they live somewhere outside of the atmosphere and there is no air for wings to hover, then why do angels have wings? Things like that. So that definitely that we know that this information is in contrast with science. The plate tectonics. Obviously, the details of which Masood is sort of mentioned, but there's absolutely zero mention of them in the Quran. I think he's reading too much into the text. The text is not saying any of these things whatsoever. The smoke, there wasn't a smoke. This is conflated with what we call in physics and cosmology the dark epoch or the dark ages of the universe, where plasma, not smoke, and they're two different things. Smoke occurs from burning, and it's a composition that we know in the chemical realm, and it's not to be confused with plasma, which is opaque, the opaque world where light cannot travel and therefore we cannot see, and that's very much emphasized by the CMB model. None of that is scientific. In fact, they're completely in contrast with the scientific evidence that the Earth was created before the universe. There are such things as skies, and there's 7 of them. That is not true, and they should not be conflated with the different layers. And it depends on how far they are from the planet Earth, and what's the atmosphere, and why we call it, the stratosphere, why we call it the different 5 realms. I'm just going to give you an idea. Hold on a second here. So you've got the troposphere, that's the lowest part of the layer of the atmosphere, up to 16 kilometers. You've got the stratosphere up to 50 kilometers. You've got the mesosphere up to 85 kilometers. You've got the thermosphere up to 600 kilometers. And then you got the exosphere, which is the furthest, and it's basically the vacuum of space. None of that is, so we're talking about 5, not 7, and they're absolutely not at all in compliance with what the Quran is trying to say here. The Quran is pretty much spouting information that's been floating in the ancient world, the 7 skies. The magical number of 7, and 7 has a magical property because it's the addition of 3 and 4, a triangle and square, and in Greek mythology, triangles and squares have magical powers, and everything could be understood in geometry. Plato's sort of, and other ancient philosophers talked about that. Therefore, the addition of 3 and 4 brings the magical number. You'll see the 7, the 12, number 3. These are numbers that are mentioned in the Bible, the Gospel, and the Quran, and these were known to be magical numbers for quite some time. What else? So smoke is not plasma. There are no 7 skies. Earth was not created before the universe, and the plate tectonics. Again, that is a very interesting conversation we're having here, because even the evolution of Earth, we're talking about Pangaea here. We're talking about a supercontinent to start with. As a matter of fact, Earth, when it first started with, was a burning ball that never allowed life to evolve because it was so hot, and it was covered mostly by water. The Earth crust started to appear eventually, and we ended up with a supercontinent where all the continents were fused all together. And the plate tectonics is not a thing, really. It's the phenomena that explains how the Earth crust moves about, creating the continental drifts and all the different landscape of planet Earth, and it continues to do so. Probably in a few 100 million years, there will be another change. There'll be another map that we probably trying to circulate in schools, because things will be different then. So none of that is explained in the Quran, and trying to read out of the creation story, which is very similar to other ancient creation stories, and trying to conflate it with science is an outstretch. Science is very, very precise. When a scientific theory comes out, it explains a physical phenomena, and it's trying to be precise to the T. It explains everything. It makes prediction, and you can apply technology to it as well. It doesn't just sit there. It actually gives you mostly things to use and use in your life. However, the Holy Scripture claims of science, they're often vague. By the way, none of the 5 tafsir, big tafsir like Al-Qurtubi or Ibn Kathir or the big ones, have interpreted these Quranic verses in any shape or form that way. Obviously, these are modern interpretation, trying to apply some scientific new concepts to, like the Big Bang model, for example, trying to reverse engineer it to suit certain narratives in the Holy Bible or the Quran, for that matter. But it falls on its head, because on its face, because it's not accurate. It doesn't represent the scientific evidence whatsoever, and it only takes one mistake, because my expectations, if something has been uttered by the creator of the universe, there shouldn't be a single little mistake. As a matter of fact, I did not need to go for that long. The very first mistake destroys the whole thing. But for the audience to understand the knowledge to understand how cosmology works and what is the actual cosmological evidence, and how the Earth evolved, how the universe have evolved, it was very important for me to narrate that. But for God to make the mistake that the Earth was the very first creation, and obviously it had to be, because Masood is shaking his head and he's going to have a chance to speak, but forgive me, but the very first thing that was uttered in the first, you call them epochs or periods, was the creation of Earth. What can I do here? That's what was first said, unless they are not following a certain sequence, and they are like one of those movies where the movie starts at the end and ends at the beginning. Maybe it's a parody that way. It will be a lovely movie I'd love to watch, but if God is trying to be sequential in terms of the order of events, therefore I have no other way but inferring that the Earth was created first. And it makes complete sense, because if humanity was the object of God's affection, the whole thing is made with humanity in mind, and therefore Earth had to be created first. Remember, we lived aeons thinking that Earth was the center of the universe, because we thought we were very, very special. It's only when we understand the evolution of the universe and cosmology, we understood to be very insignificant. In my next conversation, and I'm going to stop at that point because there isn't much of a point to keep going. I've debunked what I needed to do using modern science. If there are claims that this is matching the scientific evidence, then I would like to see citation from credible cosmologists, the likes of Sean Carroll or Lawrence Krauss or Susskind, to say that the Quran has actually provided us with scientific information. As a matter of fact, and Masood being of Indian origin would know that cosmologists, including Carl Sagan, said of all the Holy Scripture, the one that comes closest to the actual evolution of the universe is the Hindu Holy Scripture. That's the closest. Cosmologists agree with that. Neil deGrasse Tyson agree to that as well. The Quran is nowhere near where the scientific evidence that leads to the creation or the emergence of the universe and therefore I completely disagree with the premises. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Hanney. Appreciate that. 2 minutes left on the clock. Awesome. I'm going to set up, make this a 60-minute back and forth dialogue. Gentlemen, I hope you guys can allow each other to speak, and there's not over the top. I mean, you guys are going to disagree. I expect that. I'm just saying, I hope the dialogue can continue. We'll give a 60-minute opening. Super chat your questions. We'll get them during Q&A right after the opening, and then we'll do a 5-minute closing. All right, I'm going to leave the room. Nobody fight, okay? I'm just kidding. Go ahead, gentlemen.
So what I'll do is, Derek, I would like to just complete the presentation before I tackle anything of what Hani has said so far. So if it's all right.
You want to play it?
Yeah.
So this is open discussion. So I mean, I wish you would have done that during our opening, because at this point, I want you to guys actually go back and forth. You see what I'm saying?
So
don't you think, Masood, that the people are burning now to wait to hear your response to what I said? Because
absolutely. I mean, absolutely.
I think we should seize the moment, and we can come back to it.
Unshaken. I'm unshaken. I have answers to all of your.
I'm sure you do.
your suggestions. So some of them are just assumptions that have got no place in the Quran. Look,
exactly right. No place in the
premise. The premise that you're coming up with, Quran says Earth was the first thing to be created. That's not what the Quran is saying, and I didn't say that either. So you are having some sort of presumed ideas, and you're trying to force them on the Quran. Well, that's not true. I will get back to every point that I've written down.
Hold on a second here. Yeah. Can you please bring up the Quranic verse, and can we read it together? Because you're saying, I'm assuming the one that has the stages of the creation.
Yeah, that's what is shown on the presentation right there. So
yeah, or if you can, well, let's show it again, and
let's go back to the slides. Again.
Which number?
So let's go back. Let's go back to let's go back to 1. Right at the beginning. Yeah, right here. I mean, let me just answer some of your points that you raised. I never said Earth was the first thing God made, and God did not say that in the Quran. Okay, and before that, these are not miracles. God never said that this is miracle, and I never said that. Okay, you're assuming things which I never said, which God never says. Okay, God in fact says in the Quran, "Don't you see? Don't you reflect that this is how it got made?" All right. I mean, the two. Some people assume that if it's God who's making this, it should just happen in a fraction of a second. No, my dear friend, that's not how things happen. Even miracle baby Jesus got created over a period of 9 months in the tummy of his mom. God just didn't create him, boom, like that.
That's not my argument, though. That's not my argument. My argument is
it's not a miracle. God never said it's a miracle. God never said it's a miracle. I never said it's a miracle. God says, this is how I created things. All right? That's what God says. This is how I created things. All right. The next point that you raised was why do angels have wings?
No, sorry. No. You haven't. That's not my question. You still haven't answered. My question is, I'm claiming that
I'm going to take this down, by the way, because I don't see it relevant when you guys are going back and forth.
Yeah. No, actually, it was Derek, because it shows in the Quranic verse that the earth was created first. That's my point.
See, I mean, the Quran talks about...
But hold on a second. You've got different periods. Don't these periods reflect the stages that the universe
of the creation of
right?
of Earth,
and at the very
Earth and its skies, my dear friend? These periods refer to the creation of Earth itself and its skies, nothing else. It doesn't talk about the creation of sun or the galaxy or anything else. It just talks about the creation of Earth and its skies. Okay.
So you're saying the universe was created prior? Is there any mention of the creation of the universe?
Absolutely, because the Earth got created within the universe. I mean, that's a different thing to talk about at a later point in time. But what I'm focusing right now is the Quran says it created the earth and its skies in the following fashion. All right. So on the first two periods, it just put together the material and made it into a big lump, a proto-earth. That's what the Quran says. First two periods were invested in putting up this proto-earth, and the next 4 periods were invested in modeling the earth by plate tectonics, resulting in fixtures and mountains on earth. Okay, that's the Quranic narrative. So if you don't have any assumptions or presumptions into this, then you will see what the Quran is trying to communicate.
So in Quran 21:30, that the earth and the skies were one and they were split apart.
That's right. So those skies
Right.
are homosphere, heterosphere, magnetosphere, ozone,
But that's not
ionosphere,
how.
radiation belts.
But that's not how science works. That's not how Earth was created. We know that all matters. We're talking about planets. Do you know how planets form in the universe?
We'll talk about it. I'm here to do that.
But in since you're very interested in science, do you know how planets come about in the universe? How?
Yeah. So look, even when you see a volcano erupt these days, what do you see? First thing is smoke. All right.
No, okay,
And that's
so
that's you got to pay attention here a little bit. Even in a volcano, when it comes out in
where are we going to smoke though? I'm asking.
no, look, because you refuted smoke and said it was unscientific. So when God created the earth,
hold on. We're moving. Okay, can we just finish one point at a time? Because
Sure.
I'm arguing one thing. You're going to smoke. I'm asking you, how do planets form in the universe?
the material comes together, right, colliding into each other, and becomes a big giant ball, right? That's the beginning of a planet, right? The material comes together, forms a big giant ball, right? And then when there is sufficient temperatures and pressures, the core kicks in, casting out magnetic field.
Where do heavy elements come from? Where's the zinc and copper and iron come from? Because these elements cannot be created. They are heavy materials.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where do they come from then?
When the earth is put together, there's material out there, right? There's rocks, there's clay, there's water, everything out in space hanging around, and it's brought together and made into a gigantic ball.
So that is not how planets are formed. Planets are formed through the supernovae. These are the explosions of gigantic stars. Our sun is not one of them, and is not going to create new planets.
Hani, please. I'm not outruling that there were stars before the creation of planet Earth. I'm not negating that. All right. All of those supernovae thing, the explosions and the creation of iron on all the other heavy nuclei, all of that was there, hanging in the space. And God brought these material together to put up planet Earth. And that's when God is starting to explain how he created Earth. So let us not assume things did not exist prior to this event. Let's not assume that.
I'm not assuming anything. I've asked you about the knowledge of how planets are created.
And that's what I'm saying. I'm starting with the premise that there is material out there, right? And God brings this material together. That's what I'm starting, right? I'm not negating that supernovae did not occur prior to
the formation of the Earth. But that's not what the Quran is saying. The Quran is saying it's not saying that whatsoever. The Quran says
you don't have to go to that point. I mean, the Quran is trying to make a point. We are better off to understand that and then refute it. All right.
I don't understand what you're saying.
I mean, when the Quran says,
I'm just going to read the Quranic verse to you. 21:30. Do the disbelievers not realize that the heavens and the earth were once one mass? Then we split them apart and we created from water. Okay.
So look,
now that
I got your point.
That is incorrect.
We
know that never happened.
No. The skies that are the translation that you're reading, translated as heavens, often gives this idea of the whole universe, right? And that's what is happening in your mind right now, right? But that's not what it is. What God talks about in that verse is the earth and its own skies, like homosphere. It's not the universe. He's talking about homosphere, heterosphere, ozone, radiation belts, ionosphere, magnetosphere, and gravity of the Earth. That's how much he's talking about. And these are the seven skies, by the way, okay? God is giving limited information. He's only talking about the Earth and its respective skies. He's not talking about the heavens, as some translators have done the job, insinuating the whole of universe to have come about. That translation is incorrect. I mean, even today, people refer to the earthly sky as a heaven. Sometimes that's how language becomes used. All right. What I'm doing here is specifically pointing out what each of these sky layers are. And you got to be a little patient to understand.
There is a problem of understanding as well how atmospheres are working. You don't create atmosphere. The atmosphere of anything is created by the mass around it. So you don't need to do anything. As soon as a planet arrives, whether it's made of gas like Jupiter is 90% gas, or rocky like the Earth, as soon as that object comes together by the power of gravity, it creates simultaneously its own atmosphere. Based on its temperature, the Earth atmosphere was completely different 4 billion years ago.
Yeah.
It has changed.
It doesn't negate what the Quran says. The Quran says in the first two periods, the proto-world was assembled. And at that time, it had a blanket of smoke around it. And God ordered this blanket of smoke and the earth itself to come together as a functional design. And that's when the earth kicked in with its heart operating the dynamo, throwing out magnetic field, and it shrouded the earth, encasing this homosphere. And the smoke turned out to be a clear sky, homosphere as we see it today, right? I mean, it's clear. I mean, what do you want to negate here? I'm asking.
Nothing. It just does not.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's not what the Quran. Look, the Quran is.
Yeah, I know.
It gives you a cold shower, mate. I mean, the Quran is a text that gives you a cold shower. If you look into it, you'll get it. It's chilling.
For somebody who spoke to multiple scientists and cosmologists, none of them have seen. I mean, these are the experts in their areas. Have seen what has been uttered in the Quran as anywhere near
because
the
they have been seeing
of how the universe or Earth evolved.
Because they have been seeing and reading out of like you did with the heavens. So obviously they will start conjuring up these ideas of the universe and the Earth splitting apart and stuff like that. So that's not accurate way of thinking what the Quran is actually giving you information into. All right. I mean, the Quran tells specifically it's talking about Earth and its own skies, its respective skies. It never talks about the universe in this context. So we don't have to suppose it to be something else. And that's where the problem arises. And that's where the scientists go like, okay, we don't understand this. And by the way, I'll just touch a point here. If what you said about Carl Sagan said the Indian scriptures have more accurate scientific information, 100%. That's a possibility because God has communicated to nations before he communicated to Abraham. Before Abraham, there were several nations which the Bible does not mention about because these things are not in the Bible in Genesis. Genesis is cut short. All right. God has spoken to numerous other people before Abraham, different nations, and given them scriptures. All right. If the Hindu scriptures contain these things, that's the evidence that God communicated to them. All right. So coming back to the point,
are you saying that the polytheist religion of Hinduism might have
they become polytheist later on, like it happened to Israel. You know, Moses got the children out of Pharaoh, and what they did, the first thing they did, made a golden calf because they were used to it. And even later, they went to Moabites into their towns and started worshiping Baal and stuff like that. I mean, it happens. You can't control people. You see, there's only so much you can teach them.
No, I know, but
if they wander away, you can't do nothing.
The history of religion begs to differ. It's the other way around. The whole world started polytheistic because it was a lot.
Absolutely.
And then the monotheism is one of the evolution of the faith.
No,
so it's the other way around.
I disagree.
okay, I may finish. My studies of Hinduism shows very clearly, and this is we're talking about 5,000 years old scripture, that we have evidence of ancient scripture showing that Hinduism started as a polytheistic religion from the word go.
You're true. Hinduism started as a polytheistic religion. That's true. All right. But
How
the
can it be
Vedas.
inspired by God?
Wait a second. Let me complete, Hani.
Sure.
The Vedas, the scriptures, the holy scriptures of the Hindus predate their culture, right? And the Vedas condemn polytheism. Even Bhagavad Gita, if you read Bhagavad Gita, it says those who worship idols are in darkness, it says, all right? The Vedas are proponents of monotheism, all right? See, later on, even if you go to India today, man, I'm telling you, Christians worship the idol of Mary, the mother of God. Muslims visit some tombs of previous scholars. They call them wali, the friend of God. So they visit their tombs and make prayers there. Religion gets reduced after a while. Okay, it happens to Christianity, happened to Jews back even before Christ. Some of the Jews were worshiping idols, all right, and giving them sacrifices, all right. So the prophets come and condemn them, right? I mean, look, these things happen. Religions get reduced over a period of time. Today in Islam, it's horrible. I mean, people don't even recognize Quran and give it due credits. Muslims, I'm not talking about non-Muslims. Muslims don't give the Quran the due
whose
credits.
problem is that? Whose problem is that? Because if God,
people's problem.
no,
problem.
I'm just going to explain.
It's not God's problem. See,
I'm
God says.
Let me finish.
Let me finish.
Sure.
God said to Moses in the Quran, Moses, tell the children of Israel, if they become ungrateful to God and the whole world becomes ungrateful to God, it does not cause any loss to God.
Okay.
So
great,
God is not running out of stakes on a
nice story, but
people.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Now I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to counter that. I'm going to say it's not people, because if God is insisting in transferring his knowledge and his information through words and languages throughout the ages,
right,
and then these words get distorted, get understood out of context, time elapses and words have different meanings of a different period of time, so people understand things differently, and according to Islam, they reckon 2 books have already been changed, the Torah and the Gospel, and they have been corrupted. And you would start wondering, why does God insist? And Einstein has said once, one of the definition of stupidity is doing the thing with the same method and the same techniques over and over again and expecting different results. Why would then he continue to try to communicate with people using a flawed method that always end up being distorted? Couldn't he have communicated the same way he's given it to his own Lucifer, the devil? The devil can speak to you in your own language, in your own thoughts, with your own accent, with your modern jargon, and anytime, and you would understand him straight away, according to, obviously, religion. However, God gives himself the more inferior position of communicating in the language set in stone in the time that understood by people, certain people at a certain time, and gives his devil the more superior way of communicating, real time, modern, and hippie whenever is needed.
Shall I answer?
Please.
None of that is true. Look, the fundamentals, there's no graven image of God. Still is in the books. All right, Old Testament. All right, but what did the Christians do? They called Jesus the Son of God. Why? They listened to Paul, my friend. They listened to Paul, who never met Jesus Christ. All right. Now look, are they supposed to listen to Paul because Paul had this dream? No, the scriptures don't command them to do, right? But they did. Because Paul ended up converting a whole bunch of Gentiles and gave them the beliefs, and he became the center of attention for their faith. They took Paul on board and they regarded his works as the scripture from God. But none of that was true. right? If Christians today stuck to the Gospels, the synoptic Gospels, all right, they would not come up with this idea of Jesus being the Son of God, but rather they would be sticking to the premise that Jesus is the prophet of God, the servant of God, one among the messengers sent by God, the Christ. That's where they would stop. But because they have taken on additional things which were not authorized by God, they land in all sorts of problems. All right. I mean, the Quran does not say, the scriptures, the Quran does not say, this, make it a point, the Quran never says the gospel and the Torah are garbaged or changed. The Quran does not make this point, okay? Just bear this in mind. The Quran says there is guidance and light in the Torah. There's guidance and light in the gospel, all right? Jeremiah, the Old Testament prophet, he said to the Israelites, the scholars and the scribes, he said, woe to you, the scribes, who have written words with your own pen and later attributed to God. Jeremiah said that. The Quran doesn't say, all right? The Quran says, the Quran confirms there is guidance and light in the Old Testament and in the New Testament, even to this day, mate.
Sure. So I've got a question. I mean, this never addressed my allegations that why would God still use an inferior method?
Yeah. I'm coming to that.
Never addressed that. But
it just went out of my mind.
What kind of Muslim are you? Are you a Quran-only Muslim, or you're a Sunni? What sort of Muslim are you?
I'm a Muslim, like Abraham, submitted to God.
Okay. Do you believe in Hadith, Bukhari, and Muslim?
Well, did God make that? Did God made a condition that you have to believe in Hadith?
No,
did God say that?
That's not one question.
I'm asking, as a Muslim, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to listen to God or a man.
I'm asking you, do you believe in what they said? Because
as a Muslim, I'm supposed to listen to God, and God's word says, this is the guidance. It says, La rayba fihi, there is no discrepancy in it. God says.
Okay, that would be a circular argument.
Fihi.
You cannot bring an evidence from within the claim.
No, what I'm saying is, as a Muslim, I'm obligated to stick to the Quran.
Okay. Do you
not
pray
allegations that sprung later on? You know what I mean?
Do you pray 5 times a day?
Yeah, of course.
Where does it say you have to pray 5 times a day in the Quran?
See, the Quran says the prayers are 3 times. All right.
Correct.
So let me explain you what that. Let me explain you what that is.
Sure.
Right, let me explain what that is. Prayers have been happening prior to Muhammad. Okay, long before, right? David prays, Solomon prays to God, and all of these prophets fall their faces down to the ground, worshiping the Lord, right? So the prayers start early morning. That's a prayer time. When you get up from the bed, you pray to God. And the second time of the prayer is in the noon time. All right, the Quran calls it wustas, as-salatul usta, the Quran says, all right? The second time of the prayer is the noon time, right? And the third prayer time is when the day ends, all right? When the day ends, we pray. And you pray, Muslims pray 3 different prayers at the end of the day. So that makes it 5 prayers. Did you get the point?
So you reckon the Quran says 5 times?
See, look, prayer is ordained for 3 times of the day, and to the prophets, there is exclusive
prayer. No, I understand. My point I'm making, you're saying you should only listen to the word of God, right?
Yes.
I'm showing you practices you do as a Muslim. They're not derived from the Quran and derived from the narrations and word.
No.
Well,
no. So you got to be patient.
Okay, so I'll ask the question again.
You got to be patient.
I'll ask the question again. You said you pray 5 times a day. Where does in the Quran it says you should pray 5 times a day?
See, the Quran mentions prayers of the dawn, right? Of the dusk.
I understand. You said that before.
Look, of the dusk. It mentions the prayer of dusk and it mentions the prayer of night. All right. So at the end of the day, it's already mentioning 2 prayers.
Right.
And do you get that? Do you get what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, which is a time for prayer, it's already mentioning multiple prayers.
You pray 5 times a day. This is really word gymnastics at this point.
No, it's not gymnastics, mate. I mean,
it is. You're praying 5 times a day, and I'm asking you a very direct question. Where does it say in the Quran that you should pray 5 times a day?
Look, the Quran does not say it need not say some of the things that you routinely do. That's not how Quran comes to give you guidance. All right, by the way, the Quran stipulates fundamentals. It gives fundamental guidance. All right.
Okay, so
And
you
the Quran
yield.
says, look, the Quran says, see, prayers in Islam, let me tell you this, prayers in Islam have been happening without a break. There is no Sunday, for example, in prayers where you quit praying, right? Even on the Eid day, the festival day, you still pray, right? So prayers have not been abandoned even for a single time.
But
They just
what is
rolled
that?
out.
What's that to do with the price of milk?
No,
I mean,
look.
I'm
Sorry.
asking a very. Well, I understand people prayed, and I'm asking a very specific question. I'm saying you've claimed that only the word of God should be listened to, and I'm
Absolutely.
showing you that you have practices that have been taken from narrations and writings outside of the Quran. Your 5
Okay.
prayers is back
Okay,
on the back of Muslim and Bukhari after the ascension of Muhammad to the 7th heaven, talking to Moses and God, which were
Okay.
there
Let me ask you this
there
thing.
were 50 there were 50 a day to start
Let
with.
me ask you this thing. When was Bukhari written?
200 years.
Okay, what were Muslims doing until that point? Not praying?
I don't know. You tell me.
Not praying? What?
But
I mean,
why-
you're kidding
why-
me at this point in time. You're kidding me. I mean, look,
kidding me
these
what?
books
Where
that
does
you,
it say?
that you
Where does it say
these-
that you
look,
should pray
these
5
books-
times in the Quran?
Look, what I'm telling you is, look, since Muhammad lived among a bunch of people and gave them this religion, prayers have been rolling out every day without a break. Just like you eat breakfast. Every day you breakfast, the next day you get up, you eat breakfast.
Sure.
Prayers have been like that in Islam. They've been rolling out every day. So what else you need? I mean, why do you, after this, why do you need God to tell you, pray 5 times a day? Why?
Where-
I mean, it doesn't
where-
make sense.
So
It's-
how did they
and-
come
and-
to the
and
knowledge?
a
But how
discipline
did
is
they get to the knowledge?
established. A
Fair enough.
discipline is established.
But how did they
And you
get to
don't
know that
need
we're supposed to be 5
further,
times a day?
you don't need further instructions when a discipline stands established.
Well, who established
mean?
the discipline? From where? Where was what's the inspiration of the discipline? Where did it come from?
Look, Hani, I mean, look, if you study the gospel, right? If you study the gospel, Jesus went to the mountain and he prayed all night, and the disciples fell asleep. He woke them up, but they couldn't stand it. They fell asleep again. But Jesus stood praying the night, right? See, the night prayer.
Sorry,
prayer,
I'm gonna have to call a non sequitur in a lot of and I'm sure Derek, are you seeing what I'm seeing? Because I'm asking very simple and direct questions, and I'm being given a story that has nothing to do with my question. I don't know.
What
if
I
you
would
see-
like to do, gentlemen, in light of this, because prayer, I get this is like a jab
we
here.
want to go back to science.
Bring
yeah.
it back onto science. Let's do
Yes.
science.
So
Absolutely.
I'm gonna make a claim. I'm gonna ask Masood his scientific evidence.
Sure.
Do you think the moon has been split by
No.
Muhammad?
No. The
You
Quran is
don't-
explicit. The Quran is explicit in saying, when Muhammad requested God to show miracles, the Quran came explicitly telling him, if you want, dig a hole into the earth, or if you want, mount up the space and show them a miracle yourself. God is not going to do that. It's explicit.
Okay. So
Quran is
you
explicit
reject
in saying
the
no
hadith.
miracle will be given to Muhammad.
Okay, so you reject the Muslim and Bukhari hadith about the moon splitting of the Prophet
Man, I'm
Muhammad.
telling you, these books that you talk about came 200 years later. What has it got to do with the religion that stood established 200 years earlier?
Okay.
I mean, I don't see a point.
The prayer thing, but anyway, let's go back to science. Mountains. Do mountains anchor Earth so it won't sway and swing in the atmosphere?
See, the crust is so thin. If you dissect the Earth, planet Earth, the core is almost like 3,000 and more kilometers. All right, and the mantle is another nearly 3,000 kilometers. All right, and on top of that, the core sits on it from anywhere between 10 to 75 kilometers, where it's the tallest, the mountains, right? It's very thin. It's very thin on the top, right? And God says he anchored these plates that were floating on the asthenosphere Back in that day, it was molten mantle. It was fluid, and it later on got solidified as the earth cooled down, right? So these crusts were floating on top of this sea of asthenosphere, and God says he got these plates together, crushed them in, and built gigantic mountains to stabilize the earth.
Right. So my question is, in science, do mountains ensure that the earth stay within gravity, like within its orbit?
I didn't understand your question.
Do mountains help earth to stay in orbit, and it will not sway? It will not sway in the air.
What do you mean? The earth sways along with the earth.
The earth
sways along with the earth. The particles of the atmosphere they co-rotate with the earth, the particles of the atmosphere. So there's no question of earth swaying into the air.
What do mountains do when the Quranic verse says it stabilizes the earth?
It stabilizes the crust plates.
Because the word you understand Arabic?
Of course.
Okay, so the word tamid, I'm a native Arabic speaker, right? So the word tamid, which means to sway, which means sway, and it was very, very akin to a tent, and the tent gets anchored in its all four corners in order not to fly away. And when you use that analogy, it will bring to your mind that without the mountains, the earth will fly away in space.
No. So look, when people talk in their daily lives, they have a lot of mercy. They understand symbology, they understand the norms, social norms, traditions, culture, and they are perfectly fine to even say, I saw the sunset at the beach, right? But when they start looking at the Quran, they go out of their world onto the moon, and they start surmising the Quranic language to be something different. They don't give the Quran, the scripture. I mean, why do you guys treat Quran to being for non-human? It is for human. It came in human language. It uses symbology to deliver a point. I mean, it tells you a point. When the Quran talks about geology and plate tectonics, it says, I stabilized the crust with the fixtures, mountains as fixtures. And that's what it means.
Do you know how mountains occur? Why do mountains occur?
Like, what do you mean to say?
How do mountains form?
Yeah, mountains form in two different ways. One is these gigantic plates coming in and crashing onto each other, all right,
sure,
and raising these fixtures. And the other one is where the earth is cracking, or where the crust is cracking or brittle. The forces from within the mantle push a lot of magma out, right? So this is how the crust is getting annealed, if you want to understand this in the scientific terms. The crust of the earth got annealed with these fixtures.
Okay, so in what way? Again, so you're saying God's analogy here is supposed to be metaphorical and should not be understood in the way the Arabic words understood to be, which is not flying in the air. So what are you trying to say?
You have to be generous with the words.
Yeah.
To understand the concept, you got to be generous.
What do you mean by? What I don't understand. What do you mean by generous?
See, you can't superimpose. If I remove the nails and the wind blows, the tent blows away. You can't have this similar analogy to interpret the Quran, because where would the Quran is not talking about the earth blowing away. It talks about the crust plates sliding on the sea of asthenosphere. The Quran talks about the stability of these plates. It's not talking about the whole of the earth blowing away. No. So you got to be generous when you understand the scripture to comprehend the impetus it is trying to deliver. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm struggling to still understand the word generous. I don't need to be anything. I need to try to understand them in the most neutral and
absolutely
unbiased way.
You got to be neutral.
Generous is a bit biased, and to me,
Yeah, you
if
got to
I'm
be
going to
neutral. You
apply
got to be neutral.
generosity, I'll be biased, and I don't
Yeah,
want
you
to
got
be
to be
biased.
neutral. I'll buy your
Yeah.
word. I'll take it. I'll borrow it. You got to be
Okay.
neutral. Yeah.
And I'm sure the Q. I can't wait for the Q&A, because I think the Q&A will throw a lot of good questions about problems in the science. What about embryology? The bones forming before the flesh.
It's true.
That is not true.
Okay, pull out. Just Google how a baby is formed.
So you reckon there is a skeleton, and then the skeleton gets covered by flesh?
Look, if you study embryology up until when it is 12 weeks, and the developing embryo is so tiny, it's like anywhere close to 5 mils or under. The embryologists will tell you the first cells that are bones. The bone cells are the first cells that are forming. Okay, and only later on the muscle cells show up. It's very accurate, mate. I mean, the Quran delivers a cold chill. I mean, that's what it is exactly. We've been doing science for a long time, and the Quran just comes to give you a cold chill.
I'm looking it up. I know the
Just
answer.
Google it. Just Google it.
I've done this before millions of times. I'm trying to.
The Quran makes a fundamental argument, my friend. It makes fundamental arguments, because God is not sitting up there giving you, lengthy narrations.
Right.
He's giving you fundamental stuff to understand and to have faith in him, right? So fundamentally, if you study embryology, the embryologists, they will tell you the bone cells are the first cells that are forming, and only later on they see the muscle cells come up or show up.
Okay. How does this conform to the Arabic in the Holy Quran text, which says "Summa kasawna al-izama lahman," and then we covered the bones with flesh?
That's right.
There is no reference whatsoever to cells here. We're talking about actual bones.
Again, you got to be fundamental. You got to be
fundamental.
You got to go to fundamentals.
Got to be generous. Got to be generous.
You got to be neutral enough and be fundamental in understanding. When the Quran talks about, when the Quran talks about ثُمَّ كَثَوْنَا الْإِظَامَ لَحْمًا, it says we covered the bones with flesh, right?
Yes.
So it tells you the bones cells are the first to form in the embryo, and then the muscle cells are going to form. What's the problem? I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand your problem.
Do the bone?
If it was the reverse, if it was the reverse way, the order was reversed, then you had a point. Quran would be busted, and you would say, Masood, give up faith, and I would give up faith.
But there's no reference to cells whatsoever. How do cells cover each other? Cells don't cover each other. Do cells cover each other? It's it's a figure of speech, isn't it?
You're not understanding, mate. You're not understanding. See, when the Quran says he gave you hearing, he gave you hearing first.
To understand the wisdom of the Quran.
Hani. When Quran says he gave you hearing first, and then he gave you sight, right? That's what the Quran says, right? Do you have a problem with that?
I don't know what that means.
Now, have you got a problem with that? The Quran says in the embryo, the Quran says hearing comes first. And then the Quran says, then comes the vision.
Well, how is that?
I'm asking, do you have a problem with that?
Not a problem, but it's hardly a miracle, or it's hardly anything miraculous.
I'm not saying it's a miracle, Hani. Please don't put words. Please don't put words in my mouth. Please don't do that. Don't put words in my mouth, and don't put the words in the Quran too. Because the Quran doesn't call these things as miracles. The Quran says very explicitly to Muhammad, it says, no miracle.
If somebody tells me the baby inside its mother's womb, where it's dark, that most probably the baby will get to hear before seeing. How is that needs to come from a divine source? That is a knowledge. There's something called in epistemology, it's called knowledge by practice.
Yeah, that's fine.
You can find that out as a human.
That's fine. That's what God is wanting you to do. That's what God is wanting. God is wanting you to find these things out.
That's very generic.
See, when God is asking these things, he says, haven't you seen this? Don't you observe this to be in this way?
Well,
That's
how
what
about
Quran is doing.
haven't you seen the camels, how they were created? I mean, hardly. I mean, okay, I'm looking at the camels. It's all thanks to Charles Darwin. I know that they were not created, and they have
What do you mean?
evolved.
What do you mean? Not created, evolved. We'll come to evolution
Do
later.
you think camels were created the same way? They looked that way some 2 billion years ago?
When it comes to evolution, right? My second book talks about it in great detail. There are beasts that God created out of the wombs and made them into different creatures. Okay, there's a reference to that in the Quran. And probably Ibn Khaldun, the predecessor of Darwin himself, that's where Ibn Khaldun came up with these ideas of evolution by subsequent jump of species, right? A descent from species, right? So the Quran does talk about some beasts being evolved from parental species that were different, all right? But at the same time, the Quran is emphatic in telling us the creation with God happens through a concept called rakabak. Okay, the Quran uses the word rakabak, which means to put things into assembly. All right. So when God created, obviously, as we saw in my diagram on period 3, when God created life after He separated the earth and its skies, that life we know was microbial life, and subsequently higher forms of life were organized. Even in the Quran, when it says man was the latest among the creations of God, man is the latest. The Quran says this, هل أتى على الإنسان حين من الدهر لم يكن شيئا مذكورا. So the Quran proposes an evolution of life, but not from not how evolution biologists come to understand it, having descended from one cell in the beginning into various forms by natural selection. No, that's not the premise of the Quran. In the Quran, God creates life by His design through rakabak. And when God first created life, it was not a single cell in one corner of the earth, but when water touched the earth, globally, life was realized. It was not just one single cell popping up in the earth and then splitting across globally.
So,
according to the Quranic narrative,
okay,
life was realized globally.
So that is a problem, and that's in contrast with scientific evidence. The
How's
theory
that?
of evolution, the theory of evolution right now is one of the most established scientific theories out there with the abundance of evidence.
Science changes, doesn't it? Science changes, doesn't it?
No, so science
from since I've written my book, it's been 3 years now, Ancient Astronomy and Evolution of Life. Science has changed dramatically.
That is incorrect.
Previously,
I'm sorry. I'm going to have to educate you. I'm going to have to educate you.
Let me complete. Let me complete.
I was the one that had the words. You've had a lot.
Okay. Go ahead.
I'm letting you really expand, but I need to take my fair share of the conversation here.
Go ahead.
That is distorted understanding of science. Science does not change. Science is accumulative. Einstein did not come and debunk completely the Newtonian gravity, but it encompassed it and it contained it and it's added it. That's not how science works, especially in the last couple of hundred years where the scientific theory has been formed. To say that, like, for example, you're going to say science is going to come tomorrow and prove that gravity it does not exist. That doesn't happen. In science.
I'm not saying that. I'm not insinuating
science
any of that.
is provisional, but it doesn't change.
What I'm trying to insinuate is our scientific understanding changes or becomes better by the pass of each day. We understood certain things differently back then. We understand it better today. We may understand even better tomorrow, right?
Okay, so let me ask. Now, people are so eager to know about specifics in science because general conversation is not going to cut it.
Yeah.
One of the evidence of evolution in the way exactly evolution portrays it is you've got strata, you've got the earth strata, you've got the layers, and each layer in the earth represent a certain epoch, a certain period. If animals were created, and you said they were all appeared at the same time, that's
No, I didn't say that. I'm sorry. Don't put my words in my mouth. I didn't say that.
You said it just literally 5 minutes ago. So
No. What I said is life was realized globally. That's what I said.
okay.
I did not say all of them were created at once. I never said that. In fact, I said.
What do you mean life? What does that mean? Life was evolved globally, but we know that. I mean, how's that?
What I'm saying is life did not originate in one corner on Earth as a single cell and then split out globally. What I'm saying is when water touched the earth, God commanded life to be organized, and the earth received the commands of God and created life globally at once. And that would be the origins of single-celled organisms globally.
Here we go. Globally at once.
Yes.
So there's a certain period of time where life appeared.
That's right.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
So that's exactly my point that I'm making.
Okay.
So if the layers of the earth represent different times, why do we, and that's the Cambrian pre and after the Cambrian explosion, why do we then see only animals that existed in a certain time of epoch, only the fossils of these animals are within that particular layer? You will not find a mammal in the Precambrian explosion. Why is that?
Because God created different creatures in the path of time. And among his latest creature is human being. He's the last of all. So sequentially, life got organized.
But humans were not created. We evolved.
Okay, I understand the evolution premise, but what I'm presenting is the premise of the Quran, right?
I know, but it's not.
So that answers your question that why in some strata only certain specific animals are found as fossils and not others.
Of course,
it answers that question that God created these beings sequentially.
Your God confirms the science. Your God, it's quite easy for you to say, "Oh well, God made it to be that way." But here's a question: do you think Adam and Eve were the two first people to start the universe, the humanity?
Adam was the first one to be made by God. And Eve resulted from Adam, right?
Okay.
Here's Eve from Adam, right?
Here's a scientific biological rule for you. There is two scientific rules in biological: minimum founding population and minimum viable population. Each of the species have got a number, and that number is the minimum amount of number to start species or to be viable for species to continue. So it's either minimum founding population or minimum viable population. It's impossible for humanity or any species for that matter to start with only with a couple because of the. Yeah, you disagree with that?
It's a little funny. I mean, it was possible for all of these creatures to come up from single cell, and it becomes all of a sudden impossible.
What do you think? What do you think of single cell?
Bring out from Adam. Okay. I don't understand this.
What do you think a single cell is? What do you think Luca was? The lost universal common ancestor, also known as Luca. What do you think Luca was? Do you think really it was a single cell?
Look, the Quran does not rule out the possibility of life beyond.
I'm not talking about Quran. I'm talking about science here. What's your scientific understanding of the first cell? Do you think it was actually a single first cell?
No, that's what I told you. You didn't get my point. I told you.
But it's wrong. It's scientific. I know that's your point. It is incorrect. Luca wasn't a single cell.
No, look, God has a code, man. With him, he's got a code. And when he sends the code to the earth and it strikes the earth,
what has that to do with what I'm saying? What you're saying? What
makes copies of it?
Jesus, okay, man, my friend, I'm asking you a direct question. Do you think Luca was a single cell, like a single one cell? Because if you think that is incorrect.
No, I told you, man. I don't believe in that. What I told you is,
it's not believing. This is science. I'm not talking Quran. I'm talking science.
See, I told you, it's contrary to how the science comes to understand life originated on planet Earth. Scientists surmise in some thermal pot on Earth, somewhere. Mysterious enough.
I'm asking a very
Life
direct question.
originated as a single cell, and then
It-
it split.
Is
That's
it
the
in?
science narrative.
Okay.
That's the science
Okay.
narrative. But the
That is
Quranic narrative,
incorrect. I'm gonna have to put a reference here. I'm gonna put a citation. Luca, the singles it wasn't a single cell. It was a
okay.
group of cells in different places. What your
Okay.
understanding
So
of
you're
single?
agreeing pretty much with the Quran. I mean, that's the Quran, mate. It
Oh
gives you a
well, the
cold chill.
Quran. Of course, I
It
forgot. I'm
gives you
gonna
a
be
cold
generous.
chill.
Yeah, I'm gonna be
It gives
generous.
you
I
a
forgot.
cold chill. I mean, if
So
you go back to my presentation, you will see the few more cold chills down the presentation.
So my question again: the minimum viable population. There is absolutely no way that humanity or any species could have started with Adam and Eve because of the minimum founding population concept. Again,
mean,
that was
it's not a
repeated
big
in
thing.
Noah's Ark, and Noah's Ark cannot reproduce life again just from a pair.
Look, it's not a big deal. I mean, you would say
Awesome.
that you would say this claim as scientific today, and tomorrow you would come and say no, it is probably true. It is possible. So
Okay, I
mean,
don't think.
I mean,
I
say,
think
look, you got no foundational basis to make this argument. That's what I'm saying.
what I'm talking. I am saying
Look,
that.
look, I'll tell you what. In Australia, when the immigrants came, the white people came from different countries. They got some animals that were endemic to their places, and they were not native animals here in Australia, right? They got a bunch of those, and today they are a menace in Australia. They are giving them disease literally to clean up their populations. I mean, what are you talking about, man? I mean, you got empirical evidence of such experiments being repeated wherever populations have migrated, right? I mean, what are you talking about? You got to be more scientific than presently you sound.
Okay, because you've now sort of accused me of not understanding. I'll put here. No. I'm gonna put here for the audience and for Derek, please to share in this chat.
No, what I humbly request,
Hold on
Derek,
a
is
second.
Derek
Hold on a
is.
second. Please do not interrupt me.
Yeah,
Don't interrupt you in the middle of your speech. Please do not do that.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'll put a Nature's cited and peer-reviewed article on the minimum founding population in the private chat, Derek. If you could please share it. Now, I would like you in return to cite your evidence for your claim, scientific evidence for your claim. I've provided mine.
Look, that may be a research which holds some validity among some members of science today, but there's evidence. You can just Google like what happened in Australia, how the bunnies were got from outside and they became so numerous that they're eating away through the crops, and Australian government had to interfere, and they got a disease out of China's lab or a Russian lab, and they injected it into these
Sorry,
bunnies.
but what has that to do with what I'm saying?
So what I'm saying is they got these small numbers when they immigrated, and they just exploded. What I'm saying is it is possible for humankind to be realized from Adam and Eve.
It's impossible.
What I'm saying.
It is. Do you know why it's impossible? Do you know why is it impossible? Because there is a reason why. There is something called the genetic pool, and after the evolution of sexual reproduction from asexual reproduction, the whole idea was the variation of genetic pool. When you do sexual reproduction and your genetic pool is poor, the likelihood of species to survive and to have a variation in their genetic pool, so a bacteria or a virus won't kill them at one go, kill the population, will increase. So therefore, there is a number per species for minimum founding and minimum viable. If you go below, that species cannot be given rise or it cannot survive. And these numbers are like, and if you go to biology, horses have a number.
I have reared pigeons myself for a long time. I was a pigeon rearer. I loved pigeons, all right. And I've seen pigeons lay a pair of eggs, and that pair grow up to become a pair again, and they lay a pair of eggs, and that pair grows up to become a pair again, and the cycle repeats. I've seen it. I've experienced it. All right.
Okay. I'm gonna have to stop there because that is this is not scientific conversation right now. I'm talking about.
You take. I mean, what is more scientific than I'm giving you this thing that Australians, when they came to Aboriginal Australia, They got this bunch of animals from outside of the world, from a different part of the world, and they
What
just
was the number of the
exploited it.
animals? If you want this conversation to be scientific, I'd like to know the number, because the number isn't in the millions. So, for example, the minimum founding population for humans is about 2,000, right? The minimum founding population for horse could be about 1,200. So there is a number. It's not like up in the air. It's not something that we guess.
Look, so do you insinuate when man descended from orangutans or from a common ancestor?
Man descended from orangutan?
Well, that's the talk of the town in the scientific community, isn't it? Okay, maybe
No,
from a
it's
common
not.
ancestor. Maybe from
No,
a
it's
common
not.
ancestor. A common ancestor from where orangutans and human beings diverged. I mean, this is a
That
scientific claim.
that
This is a
is
scientific
correct,
claim
but
of
not.
evolution biologists.
Yes,
No, look,
also an
don't-
orangutan share a common ancestor.
no, look. What I'm asking you is, when the first human being got realized, okay, from an ancestor, did that happen to one pair of these ancestral parents who sired us, or it happened to multiple of those?
Very good question, and that requires understanding of evolution. Not a single species have given birth to another species, and that's where evolution is always misunderstood.
Somewhere, you
So
got to
I'm
jot
trying to give
down.
an answer, and I get this interrupted. So I mean, you've asked the question, right?
Go ahead.
Okay. So not a single species have given rise or give birth to a new species. That the evolution doesn't work that way. There are,
Okay.
well, that's what the likes of Stephen Jay Gould. I can give you multiple names in the scientific community would say, the experts on the field. If you disagree with them, just having read the Holy Bible, Holy Quran, and you're thinking, all right, well, I've got the knowledge I need. These are people are not even motivated by religion. They are.
Yeah,
That's evolution at play. That's how evolution works. There isn't a certain point where there's humanity suddenly. These are spectrum of species. As a matter of fact, the word species are not black and white. I've just had a recent conversation with Erica, and I invite you to have a conversation with her. She's brilliant in all matters of evolution. Gotze Gibbon, and she agrees with me, and she completely confirms that the animal kingdom is a spectrum. There isn't really a defining moment where Homo habilis became Homo erectus, became Homo sapien, became Homo sapien sapien. There isn't a defining moment, but there are small incremental change, tilting of the eyes, erect posture, the opposable thumbs, the smaller canine, the bigger skull that it contains a bigger brain. Little increments eventually comes to a critical point where a certain species will end up diverging.
Okay, there's a point when Drosophila, Melanogaster, and Simulans, these are two cosmopolitan species of the fruit flies. There is a point where they're different. All right, there's a point they're different. And if evolution biologists are these experts who catch hold of accurate information with their meticulous observation of the universe around us, they got to tell us what is the point of separation and what caused the point of separation, and how many of those points of separations really occurred for this substantial pool to propagate a new species.
Gentlemen, that is time.
Look,
Again,
we have gone 60 minutes.
Okay, and I just, Derek, in 10 seconds, I'm going to say speciation is not best explained by natural selection. I'd refer to something called genetic drift and geographical drift. It's within evolution, but it's a concept that explains speciation a lot better.
All
Derek,
right, guys. We're gonna go
Derek,
on and on.
Derek, I want a
forever.
minute. I want a minute. I want a minute.
Yeah, this is the thing. It's gonna keep going, guys. This is
No,
why.
no, no. I'm not
I mean,
saying
we've
anything
gone
new. I'm just
60
asking.
minutes.
I'm just asking permission. I'm just asking permission
Yeah,
because I've not
15
finished
seconds.
my presentation. Just because I've not finished my presentation, I would love the opportunity to just finish it off quickly. You know what I mean? I'll just go through it.
Look, let's get through Q&A and then
Okay.
let's decide on that's something we want to do, because if we were going to do this, we should have had the timing right, because calculating it, you only made it to the 7th, 8th slide and you had 16. You weren't even halfway. That it should have been a lot longer intro, or we should have rushed it quicker. I want to get to these Q&A. People have been waiting, and just want to thank Josephine Martinez for being a member, joining MythVision. I really appreciate that. Chat GPT in the house. Please discuss LGBT, civil rights, and the Quran. And what I'll do is I'll try to keep the conversation to a certain limit of time. So I guess in this Q&A, let's ask it like this. Do you see LGBT in the Quran? Like, is there anything in the Quran in your interpretation, Masood, that actually is okay with people in the LGBTQ community?
It's not scientific. Vagina is that channel that's scientifically geared and designed to take in the penis. It lubricates it during the event. So that's more scientific way of doing things. All other things are nonsense. They're not scientific.
You have any comment?
I'm just astonished by the response. It's very strange. I would love responses to really tackle the issue.
It's not scientific. What I'm saying is it's not scientific. It's not scientific.
What is it? What
vagina, the event of sex, the vagina lubricates it. It is designed. It is, even if you want to go through natural selection has taken it's done a big deal of work in designing this mechanism of vagina being prepped to be ready for intercourse. I mean, and then you want to talk about people having sex through other channels where lubrication doesn't really occur. It's unscientific. It's not according to it. It is not even in the spirits of natural selection and evolution biology.
I'm lost here, so here's my comment. Homosexuality and different sexual spectrums have been displayed in different species, not just humans. There's about it's always presented in a ratio about 5 to 10% in all population. Is as old as sexual selection started. They are inherited. There are 5 gene expressions and 5 locations in genes that are responsible, along with hormones during the pregnancy of a woman, the amount of testosterone, as well as epigenetics, where all these two needs to end up with a person with a sexual orientation. So therefore, it's a phenomenon that has been observed and has been in nature for quite some time. And therefore, what I call scientific means we observe a phenomena and we're trying to explain it. Is it explained in evolution? You bet. Please search for the benevolent uncle theory, where it says that in a population where males were dominant, and there are abundance of them, actually is also confirmed by science. The amount of testosterone after the 5th or the 6th or the 7th male will actually lead the 7th or the 8th male to have more likelihood to be homosexual. And please research the benevolent uncle theory, where this has actually been an aid to evolution, where a male member of the family will stay home with the children to take care of the children. I'm talking about Antiquity. Obviously not stereotyping, because it's a modern world is different, but I'm talking about the olden days. And that has proved to be an aid to evolution and not an obstacle, because people will wonder, why would evolution and natural selection choose people who are not reproducing? And that's your answer.
All right. Let's move on. We'll have plenty.
About that.
My friend Masood, if you
Sure.
rebut that, then then he gets to rebut and it never ends.
Got
so
it.
we have plenty
Got
of
it.
other questions.
Got it.
Constellation Pegasus, what's going on with Allah throwing stars at missiles at eavesdropping jinn? So do you want to allow Hanney to go first and then you rebut him, or do you want to go first?
No, I'll take this opportunity to just to show a slide in my presentation. If you go back to my presentation, I'll just show a slide. I'll take this opportunity to show a slide. Go to the next, 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 next. Yeah, right here. Okay. So the Quran talks about this gravity sky being imposed with balance. All right. And it goes on to say, endeavor, O assembly of the jinn and men, launch expeditions into the regions of the skies and the earth as you could. You cannot launch explorations except with the Lord's permission. So which of the favors of your Lord will you deny? All right. Upon you be directed space objects of a firebrand and smoke, which you will not stand defended. Right. Okay. So this is where the Quran comes to tell information that jinns were already exploring space back in 14th century. They were making space explorations and what to listen and eavesdrop into God's communication made to the angels. And that's when the angels would chase them off with meteors and other burning objects in space.
Hanney?
Well, that is completely unscientific. We have no evidence that angels or jinn exist in the first place.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Let alone the old understanding of what a shooting star is, because a shooting star isn't what we really see. It's not a falling star as people used to think, but it's meteorites. It's pieces of burning comets, and they once they meet the Earth atmosphere, they ignite. And that gives you the impression of a shooting star, or what we call a shooting star. They are very, very close. They only burn once they reach the Earth atmosphere, so that means they're very close to us, not in the seventh heaven. And we have not observed any of these alleged creatures that's supposed to be in existence, but science was never able to verify their existence.
Thank you. Jeff, thank you for the super chat. Scriptural language is ambiguous. How can anyone demonstrate claims of scientific revelation in scripture aren't just post hoc rationalization? How do we know? You get the question. Whoever wants to start.
Yeah, I'll start and take the opportunity to even dispel some of the things that Hani just said. I mean, Quran does not say that the stars are being thrown at them. The Quran clearly talks about space objects that burn up, the meteors or asteroids. All right, the scripture is very accurate. Okay, you just need to look into it. For example, this creation story that was just trying to explain the creation of Earth and origins of its skies. Right, the Quran comes up with this number, which is very objective to say. It tells it's 7. Right, it doesn't tell it's 6 or 8. Right, so here is. You have something here, right? When it makes an objective claim, to go and refute it. Obviously, the claim was made 14 centuries ago. I mean, today we know all of these sort of skies or layers, if you call it, exist. So it's pretty easy to find wrong. I mean, if it was 8 or if it was 6, the Quran would be busted. That's how. I mean, that's the impetus of Quran when it gives you information. I mean, it is pretty objective claim, and it you can see that it is fulfilled.
What about you, Hanney?
No further comments.
Okay. Greg Easy joined as a member. Greg, you have true salvation, my friend. Thank you for becoming a member. Constellation Pegasus. How old does the Quran say the universe and Earth is? Never thought about this until now. Different ages for both?
Do you want me to answer that?
Sure.
You can, just for the ease, Masood can always go first and I'll go second. So that way it's easier.
Okay. So the Quran does not tell about a specific age of the universe. It does not. All right. It only tells us the story of earth and its skies creation. All right, that's what it tells us. It does not tell us even how old is the earth. Forget about let go the age of the universe. It doesn't even tell us how old is the earth. All right, so the Quran specifically told us one piece of information, and that is the mechanism of the creation of earth and its skies. That's what Quran comes to give information. All right, and Quran thinks this information is sufficient evidence if people are finding evidence to believe and have faith in God.
Thank you. Hanney, did you want to comment on this?
There was no mention of age in of the universe as such. There are mention of days. There can be 1,000 days in God's counting, or 50,000 days. It depends on really which verse in the Quran you're reading. Timeline seems to be completely distorted. In any holy scriptures that I've read, it's not. It doesn't really reflect anything we know about scientific evidence of how time elapse. You can get evidence from the gospel that the earth is 6,000 years old. And the Quran doesn't really touch on times like that, but they do have very strange time measurement of a day in God's counting could be 1,000 of hours or 50,000 of hours. So I'm not sure which is which and which context would apply here, but it seems to be that God has a different time, a different watch.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sanjiv, thank you for the super sticker. Really appreciate the support. Scrolling down to the next one here. Get your questions in before we run out. There was a while where nobody did any, so just trying to find. Okay, why so religious? Thank you for the super chat. 67:4 of the Quran claims sight returns back to the eye. Kathir says this is the ayat, meaning your sight will return to you. Also, 1443 makes the same claim about the sight in the afterlife. This is not how sight works.
Oh, what it means is you get tired by gazing at the cosmos, because the artistry of God is so much out there. You would be mesmerized, and you would just gaze on, and you would be tired. That's what it means. Ibn Kathir is an exegete of the Quran a long time ago in the Middle Ages, and some of the things he's written really tells you the knowledge of that day and age, right? So it obviously doesn't really confirm to the advancement of knowledge, because he was a man back then in the Middle Ages trying to figure out what the Quran is saying. So there's no point quoting such commentaries by people of the Middle Ages.
Hanney?
These types of verses I'm not quite interested in, because they're quite sort of within poetic literature. They can be distorted and they can be understood in so many different ways. They have actually, as a matter of fact, been understood differently by, as Masood just said, well, it was understood differently by somebody who existed some 200 years after the age of Prophet, and rightly so. And this will continue to mean different things to different people. Therefore,
Also in science, the same thing happens.
Science does not work the same way. I'm sorry. Your understanding of science is
that's
incorrect.
how human beings learn. That's how human beings learn. Human beings learn in the pass of time. Previously, we hold good some ideas. Today, we
so do I get to finish
them away?
I think you had your goal, Masood, and sure. I never try to interrupt you, my friend.
I will hold my breath.
Thank you. This is subjective. This is literature, and it's allowed within the human endeavor. We understand poetry and movies and theater plays are understood and conceived differently by different people. Science, on the other hand, is different. It's trying to be neutral and objective. If you measure certain phenomena in Lithuania, it should be the same as in Egypt. It should be the same as in India. It should be the same everywhere. It should be observed the same, and it should have the same results, and it should yield the same technology used by the same people. That is what the tool of epistemology called science is trying to reach a consensus on objective knowledge. By definition, literature and poetry and words are subjective. You will conceive them differently.
Thank you. I think this is a good question. Fawad asked, did the Quran ever make a scientific discovery?
Well, the Quran is, I mean, if you go back to my presentation, Derek, I'll just show a quick slide there. It might help what the questioner get some ideas. Go back, go forward. Here, right here. Okay. When I wrote my book and released it, exactly 1 year afterwards, I released my book in 2018 January. Exactly 1 year afterwards, NASA had this story running on their website. Earth's atmosphere is bigger than we thought. It actually goes past the moon. Okay, and there we have the verse, reference 3. It says, in reference 1 as well, it says, 7 earthly skies are in encompassments over one another. Okay, and then in the next reference 2, it says, and we God built above you 7 strong skies and made a gravitating lamp. And then you see, in reference 3, it says, do not they reflect how God had created 7 skies in an overlapped design and has made the moon amidst as lightsome. I mean, 1 year after, NASA only confirmed it. So, I mean, if this is what you think by Quran's making scientific discovery, then there's a lot of it. And yeah, I mean, if you read my books, Ancient Astronomy, Allah's Narrative, and Creation of Earth and Origins of Life, Allah's Narrative, these 2 are science-based books, you will find a lot of those and a lot of dismantling of incoherent thoughts in the scientific community. So,
Hanney?
That's a bit plain. Incoherent thoughts in the midst of scientific community. I would love to see that scientific paper written and a Nobel Prize won as soon as possible, please.
I'm waiting for the day. That day.
Okay. I've just Googled. I've just actually Chat GPT'd whether the moon is in the Earth atmosphere, and it says here, I'm going to read it. No, the moon is not within the Earth's atmosphere. The Earth's atmosphere extends about 6,200 miles, 10,000 kilometers above the planet's surface, while the moon orbit is at average distance of about 238,000 miles, 384,000 kilometers from Earth. Therefore, the moon is well outside Earth's atmosphere.
I have to rebut this.
I raised my case.
I'll give you 20 seconds, Masood. I'll give you 20 seconds.
Yeah, I showed the proof, NASA article, what were they saying? And let me tell you, magnetosphere, one of the Earth's skies, extends all the way to 1,000 Earth radii. And the moon sits at 60 Earth radii. That tells you magnetosphere stretches far beyond the moon. And magnetosphere, it encompasses heterosphere. And heterosphere, magnetosphere, and gravity are the 3 sky layers which shroud the Earth. The moon.
Thank you. Beryllium.
The initial claim was the Earth's atmosphere. If we go to the other layers, yes, but you said first the Earth's atmosphere.
Yeah, no, that's
gentlemen, preserve it for your closing, because you got 5 minutes to do whatever you want at your closing. Verillion, in the 3rd day, thank you for the super chat. In the 3rd day, was it 1 rotation of the Earth, or was it 3.5 billion years? Did God create humans separate from the apes' common ancestor?
Look, the biblical reading, it says God created the earth on the 1st day, and there was morning and there was evening, and it goes and goes and goes. And on 7th day, God rested. So this is the premise which a lot of people in the world learn, that's how about the creation story. Okay, but for Muhammad, he could have easily copied this, right? When he copied 6 days, he could have also copied the 7th day rest of God and also the morning and the evening. But he never does that, right? Smart man. He never does that, right? So the Quran does not tell it was rotation of the earth as in morning and evening. It doesn't tell that. The Quran tells the creation of the earth story and its skies were in 6 different periods. The 3rd period, a lot of dynamics happened. The magnetosphere came out, shrouded the homosphere. The homosphere settled into the atmosphere, causing rain and forming clouds. And then the heterosphere formed, the ionosphere formed, and the life started. The life started as the rains fell on Earth. The life started, and the life slowly God brought about emergent life. And on the sixth period, when the ozone layer stood formed, that's when God brought about higher forms of life. So you will get a cold chill when you read the books.
Hanney?
I just got a cold chill up my ass just now because I'm reading the Quran and I'm reading 754 Surah Al-Araf. Can you please recite it for us?
Sorry, what is it? What ayah is that?
754.
754. Yeah, just wait a minute.
Because within that, it's going to have my answer.
Okay.
No, I'm kidding. Everybody knows.
Okay. All right. Indeed, your Lord created the skies and the earth in 6 periods of creation time. Then he squared upon his throne, engulfing the day into night in rapid successions. The sun and the moon and the stars measure into respective orbits by his order.
6 periods, yeah? Not 6 days?
Periods.
What's the Arabic word?
No, look. Ayyaman. Look, wait a minute.
What is ayyam in Arabic?
Look, yawm in Arabic is a day, right? Yawm is a day.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. There's no need to panic. You just mentioned the Quran talks about relative periods. God says, Inna yawman, one day with God, ka'alfa sanatim mimma ta'udun, is like 1,000 years in your with God's reckoning, right? Of your account. And in another place it says 50,000 years in God's reckoning, right? Look, what I'm insisting is the Quran never claims a morning and an evening when it talks about the creation of
what does a day mean? What does a day mean?
Because the first day, you see, the Quran talks about 2 days to assemble the proto-earth, right? In the first day, it is not even assembled, right? For example, in the first period, it's not even assembled, right? So there's no day, right? You know what I mean?
I don't care about that. I'm caring about the words used by God.
God
has not used. You said period. You've gone out of your way to say the word period, but the word in Arabic.
Why do you reckon that is the case? Because the Quran talks about different times.
Okay, let's do the math. So if a yom, which means the day in God's reckoning, is 1,000, 2 days will be 2,000. If it's the 50,001, 2 days means 100,000 days. Okay, none of these are still accurate.
Okay, that's fine. I got your point. You're coming back to the radiometric dating, right? And how do we know Earth is 4.5 billion years old? Because we found samples that go through radiometric dating procedure, and that's how we know it's so many billions years of old, right? Now look, carbon dating, right? Carbon dating equation has been refined a lot, many times to become accurate.
Sorry,
and with the help of dendrochronology.
Yeah, you don't use carbon dating.
By dating the trunks. Yeah. Let me.
Carbon dating is up to 30,000 years.
Let me finish. So with the help of dendrochronology, like measuring the age of the trees by cutting the trunks and counting the rings, they helped fine-tune the equation of carbon dating. Still, despite all these measures, they dated Mungo Man, an Aboriginal sample in Australia, by different agencies globally, by different agencies, labs, and the differences are staggering. 15,000 years, 25,000 years, 35,000 years, 60,000 years, 68,000 years. And this is what you're getting out of an equation which has been fine-tuned by strong evidence that's coming from dendrochronology, right? Now, if you go to uranium dating, all right, there has not been any such fine-tuning happening with this equation, because the years, the spaces are so
Sorry,
wide.
are you saying
Right?
the age of the universe?
What is the
could be-
accuracy? What I'm saying is, what is the accuracy?
I'm gonna
How do
have
you
to
rely
move.
that
I'm gonna have to
equation?
move on, gentlemen. We're gonna have to get moving
How
on
do
to
you
the next
rely
one.
But
on
I
that
just want to
equation?
make one last comment here. That
Yeah.
I've asked a direct question. It says literally in the Quran 6 days.
So look, the days can't be interpreted to mean morning and evening as it comes in the Bible. It cannot be.
And I'm saying I can use it as a day. I mean, you can use it as 1,000 days as per the Quran, or
1,000 years,
50,000 days as per
50,000 years,
50,000 years as per
50,000
Quran,
years.
or 1,000 years as per Quran, and still none of these three answers are
Because we don't know the right answer. Because we don't know the right answer.
do.
We don't have the right answer.
Oh, so
All we have is an
All
equation.
right,
that is not fine-tuned.
gentlemen. Enough on this one. Let's keep going. You'll get 5 minutes at the end. Can USA pack? Did Muslim scholars discover that 72 translucent grapes are actually 72 translucent virgins?
Well, to be honest, the Quran. I've got to be fair. The Quran does not give this number 72. It does not. All right, and you see an antelope. I mean, if you watch National Geographic or Animal Planet, you will see an antelope mate with a herd of females ranging 50 to 100 females. I mean, have some courtesy, guys. We are humans. So there's so many gifts out there in paradise, including virgins. I don't know the number. Maybe more, maybe less. I don't know.
Hanney?
the obsession of virgins is just incredible. And just imagine different women coming at you. You can like, hey, honey, I can clearly see your liver. I mean, for goodness sake, translucent. I mean, imagine being a martyr and going into pieces just to be presented in heaven with a plate of 72 raisins instead of what you're expecting. It would be quite a thing. But to me, just the obsession of sex and virginity, the deflowering of virginity.
I don't want to go back and forth on this one, Masood. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of sick.
Can USA packs back again 1140 Noah to load 2 of every kind on the ark?
Look, again, Bible, the Christian believers have done great damage to the cause of God. With all humility, and I'm being really humble. I'm not really being being disrespectful of Christian believers, but they have done great damage to the cause of God. And one of it is making these gross assumptions of a global flood with Noah, right? I mean, if you see in God's narration, be it narrative, be it Old Testament or the Quran, God talks about punishments given to people in a specified geographic location. God has punished several nations, and those punishments, even the punishment of Lot, for example, for sodomy, that was in a specific region. Okay, at the time of Noah, God need not flood the entire earth to punish Noah's people who were disbelievers. It was a geographic specific event. All right, but somehow, even today, I mean, just last week I went to a church and asked him the same question. Do you believe God created earth in 6 days, literal 6 days? Do you know what a week looks like? And he said to me, mate, this is the end of the debate. And he just walked away out of my face. He just took off from my face, left me alone at the table, right? There is people who literally believe in certain things that obviously, which have obviously happened because of scribal annotations into the scripture. That's when Jeremiah said, "You scribes have written lies into the scripture, and you attribute that to God." So, because of some things that have gone wrong, that's where the Quran comes. Muhaiminan alayhi. The Quran says the Quran is a scripture that covers the back of the Old Testament and the New Testament. It's a guardian scripture. It guards the previous scriptures. and its authenticity. So you go to the Quran to see the information, and Noah's flood was very localized. He never got kangaroos hop on his ark.
Hanney?
Well, I'm not sure if the answer really hit the nail on the head here, because I'm waiting. Is Masood saying this is a figure of speech? So that actually didn't happen that way? Because if it happened that way, then we have a lot of issues. The only way you can get away with this is by saying this is supposed to be a figure of speech. It's
No, I'm not
supposed to
saying
be
that. Noah's flood happened as a localized event.
So it was a local event.
Yes.
Right. So it was a local event, and only the local animals, right?
Yes. Local
Okay.
ecosystem, yes.
So we're having another problem again with the biological minimum founding population one more time, and in this case it will be minimum. It will be minimum viable population, because these are actually living creatures, and there will be a number which you reach right now. If we like the white rhino situation, once you reach a certain number, that animal is as good as extinct. When you reach just a pair of animals as a you will not be able to kickstart that population again.
Yeah, we'll talk about it in detail next time, I suppose.
Verillion, does the Quran include equations like F equals ma or Kepler's law? Wouldn't that be better than vague descriptions?
Well, you should understand the Quran was communicating to a people who did not read or write. I mean, there were people who had an oral tradition, and nothing. You will not find any Arabic literature dating back to that time other than the Quran. It became the first written Arabic literature, literally. So they were not a people keen on experimenting science or anything like that. They were shepherds, peasants. They had a small world where they lived, and these mighty empires overshadowing them, and they did not want to go there. You know, these empires, nobody wanted to control the space because it's so dry, desert. There's no benefit in controlling that space. You know, I mean, you know what I mean. So people like that, God is trying to reach out, and they are stuck in polytheism. God wants to liberate them, and God has a way of doing things, and the way He's done is marvelous. And the equations that the things that I'm explaining in my books, you will have your jaw drop when you read that.
Hanney?
Not sure about jaw dropping here, because you know, never mind. I gotta be fair, and if there was a God, I wouldn't expect God to put equations. This is a classical physics. You know, that explains all motions, really, by Isaac Newton. Force equals mass and acceleration, and you would still use it for escape velocity for rockets and stuff like that. I would not expect God to you know, if I was a God, I would want to leave something for humanity to discover. But I could have at least asked them to wash their hands. You know, tell them about the germ disease. Tell them about things that will harvest them in hundreds of millions.
That is told and very popular in Islamic tradition, to wash hands before meals.
Yeah, and you know, there are a lot of issues. I think there will be few things I would have expected God to put, but at least when He mentioned some evidence of what the way He created the universe, the way He created things, to be consistent with science. But the fact that they are not, it makes me think. What is so funny?
Hey, so last question, and this is to you, Masood, and then we're going 5 minutes each.
I'm just calling a Dunning-Kruger effect here, to be honest.
Why so religious? Is Ahmed a Quran-only Muslim?
Look, as I told, if Christians believed in the Gospels, they would be better off, and they would be better off in their faith terms and in so many other terms. The reason for the Islamic decline is essentially because Muslims have increasingly relied on people as mediaries to explain the Book of God, while the Book of God itself says emphatically I have made the Quran easy to understand. Is there anyone to reflect? God says again and again in one of the surahs. All right. So Quran comes out with this elucidation, which says it's easy. I've made it easy for a common man. He need not even attend school. So he will still understand my word. That's the premise that God comes from and approaches humankind, right? So there's no point that Muslims should rely on people like myself or others
So
to
everyone
get
in the
information.
chat, everyone in the chat is saying
Yeah.
yes or no. Like
A
yes,
Muslim,
Quran only.
God will never ask on Judgment Day from Muslims whether you believed in Bukhari, Tirmidhi, Abu Dawood, Muslim. He will not ask that. He will ask,
So you
did you
are.
believe in the Quran and did you do what the Quran wanted you to do? That's all.
So are you Quran only or not?
I mean, am I not being explicit enough in telling you
Well,
don't need
you
other
could say yes,
sources?
I'm Quran only, or
Yes,
no,
I
I'm
mean,
not.
there's a Muslim is a person who believes and confirms to the Quran 100%. I mean, what else you want me to say? Nothing else. Nothing else. You don't want more. You know what I
So
mean?
technically, you could say yes, you're Quran only.
Yeah, I mean, I'm making it quite emphatic.
Okay.
I mean, people, you see these believers, they go on and start calling names and stuff like that. A lot of that happens in the community. You know what I mean?
The crowd is forcing me to have you clarify. So just so you know, Henny, did you want to just make a response to that, and then let's do our 5 minutes.
This is going to be a general one, which is, I think coined by Christopher Hitchens, the cafeteria religion, where you go and pick and choose to fill your tray with what you really like. And I
It is not.
stop at
It's
that.
not. It's not. The
All right.
revelation ceased with Muhammad, and it's finished.
So,
Yep.
who wants to start in their 5-minute closing?
Hani can have it. I opened it, so Hani can have it.
All right, let's mute our mics, and we'll allow Hani to do his 5 minutes, and then I'll let Masood, and then we are wrapping up the debate. Hani, let me know when you're starting.
Well, thank you very much, Derek, for allowing us to have a platform to today's conversation. Thank you, Masood, for being a worthy opponent. I disagree with a lot of the stuff you've said, mainly on back of one thing and one thing only. It seems to be that you are not well versed in science. That is my issue here. My issue is like your understanding of evolution, cosmology, distorted. Even when pressed, you've questioned the scientific method altogether. Like, for example, when we start talking about Earth, you said, how do we know for sure the Earth is 4.5 billion years old? And only you've yielded that information once you were pressed on the use of day, because you first claimed that God never uses the word day, but I'm a native Arabic speaker and I can spot the day in the creation, and I've showed you the verse. And then we said, oh, well, the day is different, might be different, God's counting. And we mentioned the two verses where a day is 1,000 years, or a day that's 50,000 years, and still not consistent with science. Then we went to do we really know for sure the Earth is 4.5 billion years old? So it seems to me that this is a priori, and that is the distinct difference between a posteriori knowledge and a priori knowledge, or presupposition. Faith will dictate it. You've got to believe first, and every other observation have to fit that particular belief. While science, stripped from all sort of biases as much as we can, there are still issues, but the scientific method ensures that the self-cleansing mechanism and self-correcting mechanism of the scientific method is still applied. And science will follow the steps to the point where the evidence lead to the new persuasion or the new conviction. And these are a non-overlapping magisteria. I'm going to be borrowing from Stephen Jay Gould here. These two are parallel lines that never meet according to Euclidean geometry, because they do meet in curvature or curved space. Unlike, people believe that parallel lines never meet, they do meet in curved space. So there are two different methods. One is predicated on a priori understanding, presuppositions, and you try to fit everything you see, everything you observe within that particular belief. So it's a continuous reverse engineering of information. While science do it the other way around. They don't have any particular preference of what the outcome is going to look like. At some point, the eternal city-state theory of the universe, that the universe is eternal, is unchanging, was very much been propagated by Albert Einstein, the most famous of celebrity scientists at that time. A Belgian monk comes up with the Big Bang model that tells us that the universe had a beginning. And although that this might give, because a lot of people were panicking, even some religious people think it's actually a horrible thing. Actually, it gives a way back into a creator, because the universe is begun. It's not eternal as we once thought. And if science was really motivated by non-theism or the denial of God, some theists think that that's the agenda, then this sort of thing would have been blocked. But no. Science go with the evidence, and the CMB model and so other models confirmed that the Big Bang model is currently the most accurate, and therefore the scientific world has changed its consensus based on evidence and not based on any prior belief. And that is a departure. So my problem today with Masood's presentation is the lack of understanding of the scientific method and what actually science says about the different areas: evolution, cosmology, geology, and they're being distorted to suit the religious narrative. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanney. Appreciate that. I'm going to start my clock back to 5 and go ahead and mute. And Masood, you have 5 minutes starting now.
Well, thank you, Dorek. As I said, I'm really impressed with your work, and I was always trying to find possibilities of doing that in Adelaide, but everywhere I went, the doors were shut. I'm very happy for you. You're able to do it. It's great. So I want to go back to the slide and just close all these comments with one slide. If you go back to the presentation, go further. Further down. Yeah, here, right here. Okay. So this is pretty much going to nail everything down. So if you look at this, what the Quran says and how the science has come to understand the creation of earth and its skies, here are some ratios to grapple with. All right. If suppose the earth existed with its fully formed continents, like how it appears in the modern world, for 3 hours, okay, it took, according to the Quran, in the first 1 hour for the proto-earth to form, as opposed to how science understands this. At the moment, it has taken 890 hours to form the earth the way it is in the modern with the modern continents. What I mean by that is Mount Everest forming, and the earth, the proto-earth was formed in the first hour. And it has taken the significant time since the earth already stood formed for modern continents to realize. It's taken that significant amount of time. All right. Now, point B. According to the Quran, the modern continents galvanized. If the earth existed for 3 hours, the modern continents got galvanized in 2 hours. All right. As opposed to how science says that it took 8 hours for the modern continents to galvanize out of the 227 hours. If you want to map Pangea breaking at 200 million years ago, right? And according to the Quran, the core operations, the Earth's dynamo, started immediately when the proton Earth was ready. But in science, there was a big delay of 700 hours for the core to kick in its operations. Okay? And what that tells is there was 100 hours of further delay in propagating the shear forces from within to move the plates, because of the concept that scientists today talk about, the supercontinent breaking out 3 billion years ago, right? Okay. Now, what this means is, like, the engineering forces assembled a car, and with fuel in it, it never started. It never started for 700 hours until finally it starts. But guess what? The transmission doesn't work for another 100 hours. And then guess what? The pizzas get delivered just in time. How is that possible? This tells you the abrupt estimations of radiometric dating. And once again, we have the point number D. The water cooled on Earth in its 3rd hour after its birth, according to the Quran, okay? But in science, it cooled 150 hours afterwards, since the Earth was in its a proto-Earth. And what this says is, the Earth's atmosphere formed, what it actually entails and infers is, the Earth's atmosphere formed nearly 50 times as slow to mature its pressure. Because once Earth's atmosphere is formed with its pressure, it condenses liquid water, right? So if you take the case of Mars, the water on Mars dried out in the initial years. All right, a lot of its water got dried out in the initial years. Imagine planet Earth, to not to have the atmosphere or magnetosphere for 1 billion years. What would happen? Imagine what would happen to the water on Earth. So these ratios should give you further chills to investigate the information that I'm bringing about with some seriousness. So I'll conclude here, and thank you very much, Hani, again. I mean, it was really it's really a pleasure to talk to you, an ex-Muslim, an ex-Christian, and I'm a good guy. I myself was at the verge of rattled. I was rattled by my friend Peter Maurice in Adelaide. He said, a man like you should not believe, seeing that the God doesn't exist. If you want to believe, where's the evidence? If you're convinced, convince me. So that's when I wrote the books. So my brain is loaded with knowledge, and I would like to continue talking to you guys. It's wonderful. I mean, not just on this subject of science, but on various other stuff. So I'm looking forward to a fruitful relationship.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Masood.
Thank you.
Hani, I appreciate you and Masood tonight and joining me here on MythVision. I hope everybody enjoyed, whether you agree or disagree. Maybe you walked away with something new to think about, or at least to be prepared on what people might say out there pertaining to their arguments. So I'm going to get off, go eat dinner, and I seriously appreciate you, gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
You're
Derek.
muted, Hani.
Have a good day.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Masood, and thank you to your viewers. Thank you very much. And
thank you to all the viewers. Yeah, thank you to all the viewers.
Thank you.
God bless.
Have a good one.
Right.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.